There's a lot more to food than what meets the fork. But sometimes you have to take things with a grain of salt. Tonight, I'll bet you can't guess who invented the sandwich. Does the hoagie have an identity crisis? Are burritos and sandwiches so different?
I hate you.
Tell it to the judge.
Order.
Are they old wives' tales? Ancient elixirs? Or just clever marketing ploys? Every bite you take has a story. Every morsel a myth. Is it baked with fact or flavored with fiction? Simple and satisfying, yet eminently adaptable, the sandwich is a paragon of portability. From pastrami to pulled pork, everyone has their favorite. But what if this wholesome American staple was invented at a card table rather than a kitchen table? Did the first sandwich feed a gambling problem? People have been slicing and filling bread for thousands of years, but not quite like the double-decker footlongs we chow on today. In the 1st century BC, a rabbi named Hillel the Elder is said to have put lamb, mixed nuts, and herbs between 2 pieces of unleavened bread for a Passover snack.
Hey, pass the mustard!
In the Middle Ages, taverns offered thick slabs of stale bread called trenchers as edible plates, piled high with cooked meats and vegetables, much like an open-faced sandwich. Of course, cleanup was a snap. Now, if the idea had been around for so long, when did the sandwich actually become a sandwich? Most experts agree that it was created by a very important man with a healthy appetite and a slightly less healthy gambling problem. Sandwich king Jeff Morrow has the inside track.
So the story goes that in 18th century London, there was a secret society called the Beefsteak Club. Now, these guys would pick a location every month and get together to gamble, to drink hard, and eat bloody steaks. And one of its most notorious members was the First Lord of the British Navy, and his name was John Montague.
Let's party! Woo!
So John was a serious gambler and had some serious vices. In 1762, during one crazy 24-hour partying session, John Montague was on a serious hot streak. So serious, in fact, that he did not want to stop gambling. So when it was time for the fellas to take a steak break, he said, So he ordered that the cook bring his steak tucked in between 2 pieces of bread. This way, he could still gamble with one hand and eat with the other.
It just so happens that John Montague was a nobleman, an earl, in fact, the 4th Earl of, say it with me, Sandwich. A lovely little town in the south of England. But that's not all.
Sandwich was also Montague's nickname. So when all him and his buddies got together and they saw that Montague was on another gambling tear, and they saw what he was chowing down on, they yelled out, "I'll have what Sandwich is having!"
This late-night nosh was an instant hit with London's aristocracy, who lovingly named it the Sandwich in Montague's honor. But the Sandwich knew no boundaries of class or station and quickly conquered the country at large. It was a virtual sandwich mania.
So Britain went silly for sandwiches, so much in fact that sandwich became a verb. They even named a chain of islands in the Pacific after it.
Today, we know those little sandwich islands by a different name. Hawaii.
Aloha!
But believe it or not, the sandwich was not an instant hit in the U.S. Colonists were still wary of any culinary trends handed down by the British.
Eat it.
Nope. In fact, Americans didn't officially fall in love with the sandwich until the 1920s, when one St. Louis baker made a bread loaf breakthrough by developing the key ingredient.
Gustav Pappendick invented a new way to slice and package bread. So now, moms could throw together a lunch faster than you could spell bologna. And this secured the sandwich in the lunchroom forever.
So, while Britain justly takes credit for its creation, clearly the sandwich was perfected in America. Today, there's a different sandwich for nearly every state in the country, and everyone's got their favorite.
I like turkey and cheddar.
Papa's family and that.
Roast beef and Swiss, I guess. And easy.
Meatball sandwich all day.
The club.
How do you know? Oh, yeah.
My favorite sandwich in the world is our famous Big Candy BLT here at Pork and Mindy's. It's the perfect combination of meat, bread, fresh veggies, and sauce. Every sandwich starts and ends with the bread. So treat your bread right. Beautiful toasted bread, crispy, caramelized, candied bacon, fresh Roma tomatoes, whole leaf romaine, our barbecue rub mayo. Put the roof on the house, baby. Greatest version of the greatest sandwich in existence. Oh, so good.
Whether it's on wheat or rye, toasted or smothered, a great sandwich truly holds its own. But could a sandwich also hold together a rocky relationship? Find out next on Food, Fact or Fiction.
I hate you, you're stinker.
New Orleans. The streets vibrate with hot jazz and bad decisions, where even the most married of men struggle to behave.
I hate you.
In the Big Easy, it's hard to have scruples. Somehow, those same men have managed to keep their marriages intact and score big points for moral fiber. But a certain sandwich gets the assist. In the early 19th century, an irresistible fried oyster sandwich hit the Crescent City. Nestled in a buttered loaf of fresh French bread, deep-fried oysters could feel right at home. But as New Orleans native and chef Marcus Benninger explains, it was so good, it could also save your marriage.
In those days, quite frankly, people were getting so trashed, they would black out. They'd be gone from the house for days, maybe even weeks. This fried oyster sandwich was apparently good enough that if you came home with it, it could get you back in good with your lady. I don't know if that's true or not. Hasn't worked for me, but, you know.
I'm sorry. I didn't really mean to hurt your feelings.
The edible apology later became appropriately known as the Peacemaker. Ah, apologies. It's what's for dinner.
Behold, bow before the king of all sandwiches, the hoagie. Oh, sorry, the sub.
Oh, hold on, pardon me. I mean the hero. The truth is, this baby has more aliases than a CIA operative. How could one sandwich have picked up so many monikers? Is a hoagie a hero or a sub? Well, it turns out these three names are just the tip of the iceberg.
That's a Cosmo.
Bomber.
Sub.
It's a wedge.
Flippy.
Definitely a grinder.
Torpedo.
A hero? Zeppelin, baby.
Wow. Okay, forget the names. Let's actually talk about the sandwich itself. As it turns out, all of these, whatevers, are descended from the same ancestor, the Italian sandwich.
Mamma mia! Now that's Italian.
Either by mistake or master plan, this distinctive sandwich began popping up along the northeast coast around the early 1900s. But one state in particular claims to be the place where all the magic started.
Maine lays claim to the invention of the Italian sandwich, much to the chagrin of the lobster roll. It is considered Maine's signature sandwich.
Italians were emigrating to New England at a healthy clip, and one enterprising transplant had a deliciously brilliant idea.
Around 1903, Giovanni Amato used to sell fresh rolls from a pushcart to all his fellow immigrants working on the docks in Portland, Maine. After a little while, he's like, I'm gonna throw a little meat on there, or put a little vegetable, a little oil, some peppers on there. And next thing you know, the Italian sandwich is born.
This oversized sandwich was the perfect way to feed the scores of hungry Italian-American workers on their lunch breaks. As the Italian immigrants sought new horizons, the sandwich made its way around the country, garnering a long list of nicknames and some pretty silly folklore to boot.
There's so many names for the same sandwich, it gets very confusing. Can't we just all agree upon one name, which is obviously sub? The term sub comes from an Italian sandwich-selling grocer from New Jersey named Dominic Conti. And one day, Dominic visits the Patterson Museum, and he saw this bizarre 19th century submarine. And he goes, that looks a lot like my sandwich. I can do that, I'm 100% Italian. And from that point on, he started calling his sandwiches submarines, AKA the sub. The biggest sub I ever saw was a 6-foot party sub that I made myself about 15 years ago, and I'm still eating on it in the back.
Like the sub, the Zeppelin, the bomber, the torpedo, and the wedge all have names inspired by the shape of the bread. But what if you're in need of a hero? No, not that kind. This kind. It took a scrappy journalist by the name of Clementine Paddleford to suss out this super sandwich's secret identity.
Clementine coined the word in her food column in the New York Herald Tribune back in 1936. She saw a sandwich so large that she said you have to be a hero to eat it, and the name stuck.
But what about the hoagie, you ask? This one just has too many origin stories to list. Turns out the only thing Philadelphians love more than hoagies is a good story.
Mummy, tell me about the sandwiches.
There's the one about the Italian immigrants working on Hog Island during World War I, or the tale of the hungry Irish newcomers bearing the last name Hogan.
Hoagie rule.
Everyone was hogging the credit. Speaking of which, the jazz scene may have belted out Philly's best hoagie story of all.
Supposedly, in the late 1920s, there was an out-of-work jazz musician named Alfonso de Palma. Now, he was walking down the street after a gig, and he sees this guy eating a sandwich so big that he said, "Man, you gotta be a hog to eat that sandwich that big." So during the Depression, Al opens a sandwich shop in Philly and starts selling these hogs, which eventually became known as hoggies.
De Palma quickly became known as the King of Hoggies. Mom would be so proud. But how did we get from hoggy to hoagie?
Well, I guess at some point, the Philly accent took over, and hoggies became hoagies. So the name just stuck, and that's why we all sound like Rocky Balboa when we order a hoagie. "Hey, yo, Paulie, can I get 2 hoagies to go? Hey, Adrian, something like that.
All right, so is a hoagie a hero or a sub? Simply put, yes. It's all about location, location, location.
Call it what you will, the sandwich will answer. But if I may offer some friendly advice, don't order a sub in Philly. Trust me.
What's in a name? Well, when it comes to Italian sandwiches, a lot. But could a sandwich make you famous? Find out next on Food, Fact or Fiction. The Reuben is a New York classic. Like so many foods, no one can agree on its origin, but the people have spoken. Corned beef, Swiss cheese, sauerkraut, and a little Thousand Island on rye is a singular sensation. But was it almost called the Marjorie? Try a bite of this. Late one evening in 1914, Marjorie Rambeau, a popular Broadway actress, ran into a restaurant owned by Arnold Reuben. She supposedly cried,
"Make me a sandwich and make it fast, see?"
So Reuben did. After just one bite, Marjorie said it was the best sandwich she'd ever tasted and suggested Reuben name it after her, to which he replied,
"Like heck I will. It's a Reuben special."
And Reuben's name is now immortal. So while you can't order a Marjorie,
I'm delicious.
Don't feel too bad for her. She ended up with a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. But it probably doesn't taste as good.
How dare you?
The beloved burrito. A hot flour tortilla loaded with meat, cheese, rice, beans, and of course, love. This humble Mexican meal has become an iconic American favorite, but since the burrito first crossed the border, it has become the culinary center of a divisive legal debate. Is the burrito a sandwich? People have been wrapping ingredients in corn tortillas for centuries, but burrito aficionados like Dan Pashman say this particular Beanie Baby was born in Chihuahua, Mexico, back in the early 1900s.
Hi, Chihuahua!
In northern Mexico, wheat grows better than corn, so the folks there actually invented flour tortillas. So first, I want to say to the people of Chihuahua, thank you. I mean, flour tortillas and me go way back.
And these flour tortillas were stuffed nice and fat with meat, cheese, and beans to birth the burrito. But who came up with this baby's name?
Well, there's a few different stories, but the one that I like relates to the donkey. You see, the Spanish word for donkey is burro. The word for a small donkey, burrito. And those little donkeys, they used to carry these blankets on their back that were rolled up just like burritos. Now, the most important thing you're probably wondering about, how do you roll a really great burrito? Well, a couple tips. First, start with a warm flour tortilla. That way, when you press it all together, the seams will kind of fuse together. Next thing you want to do is don't fit more in there than can fit. Ratio management, people. And the third tip is fold in from the sides before rolling. So you're going to fold in from the side. That caps everything, keeps it all together. Then we roll forward. Then you have the glory that is a burrito.
The burrito finally made its U.S. debut in the early 1900s, and once stateside, received a warm welcome. Oh, Lou. But the burrito's naturalization process hasn't come without controversy to spice things up. Could the burrito actually be a sandwich? The law has spoken.
It is usually one of the most secretive of crimes.
But what did it say?
Only these defendants could have committed this crime.
The burrito has its day in court when Food, Fact or Fiction returns. Since its emigration to the U.S., the burrito has been subject to countless attempts at reinvention. But no matter what you put in it, you would never consider it a sandwich. Or would you? The answer may all depend on where you eat it. Different states have different opinions, but according to Massachusetts, the burrito is definitely not a sandwich. As a burrito Supreme Court Justice, Dan Pashman has spent a lot of time weighing the issue.
So 2008 in Massachusetts, there's a sandwich chain in a mall. And they have a deal with a landlord that says no other sandwich shops will be allowed to open up. One day, the landlord rents space to a burrito shop. The sandwich place says, hey, I thought we agreed. No other sandwich shops here. Come on. And then the landlord says, but it's a burrito shop, and a burrito is not a sandwich. And the sandwich shop says, we're taking you to court. Well, you wouldn't believe what happened next. A chef, a food writer, even a high-ranking former agriculture official were all called in to testify on the burrito's behalf.
Hey, Burrito's a good guy. Yeah, leave Burrito alone. Burritos!
Sure, a great guy, a saint, feeds the hungry, literally. But is he a sandwich?
I have the ruling right here. This court finds a sandwich to be two thin pieces of bread, usually buttered, with a thin layer as of meat, cheese, or savory mixture spread between them. The term sandwich is not commonly understood to include burritos, tacos, or quesadillas, which are typically made with a single tortilla and stuffed with a choice filling of meat, rice, or beans. And I gotta say, in my expert opinion, Massachusetts got it right. The difference between two slices of bread and a single flour tortilla. A burrito is not a sandwich, it is a wrap.
Well, maybe in Massachusetts. Unfortunately for New Yorkers, the Empire State felt differently. Forget about it.
According to the great state of New York, sandwiches include cold and hot sandwiches, whether made on bread, on bagels, on rolls, in pitas, in wraps, or otherwise, and regardless of the filling or layers. A sandwich can be as simple as a buttered bagel or roll, or as elaborate as a 6-foot toasted submarine sandwich. And yes, they even include on this list the burrito. Calm down, calm down, calm down. Order, order, order. Bailiff, please remove that woman.
That's right. In the state of New York, the burrito is a sandwich. And the main reason? Tax revenue. Sorry, but like it or not, it's the law.
Case closed.
National Sandwich Day falls on November 3rd every year. But I know a lot of burritos that won't be celebrating. And for the rest of you, party responsibly. But don't take it from me. Just ask the Earl of Burrito.
Today, we learned that humanity was dealt a winning hand by the Earl of Sandwich. You can call an Italian sandwich anything you like, just don't call it late for lunch. And the burrito is not a sandwich, except in New York. You got a problem with that? No meal is complete without a spoonful of fact and a dash of fiction.